Joey Clark.
Welcome into the program. I'm your host, Joey Clark. 272-9228, as the big voice said. Also, you can comment and watch or just listen online. Joey Clark Live on YouTube. Like and subscribe. Also can watch on the Book of Faces. Just search Joey Clark, or on the X platform at the Joey Clark. And, well, a lot to get to today, a lot in the news, but I'm very much happy to introduce our guest today. For the beginning of the show here, we have Gerrick Wilkins. He is a candidate for Congress. How are you today, sir?
Man, I'm doing great now that I'm down and with a little bit warmer weather than it's been the last few days up in Birmingham.
Sure. I'm having to drip every faucet. We got to make all this work there. But have you ever been told, somebody brought this up to me the other day, you look like Rush Limbaugh?
So, I've actually had that comment a lot of times in my life. You look like a young Rush Limbaugh, and I consider that a great compliment. I mean, that's what got me started as a kid listening to Rush Limbaugh. It started me down the path of conservative views and, of course, loving talk radio.
Well, do you like a cigar every once in a while?
I don't go quite that far. No cigar for me.
All right.
But,
I do it every once in a while. I know some folks do it every day. I can't go that far with it. But yeah, the spitting image, I think it works for you. Now, let's remind folks, because you're running for Congress, but it's in District 6, and that's been redrawn like everything else. So where is the new District 6?
District 6 is huge, but I will tell you it goes up and down I-65 primarily. So we make up part of Jefferson, all of Shelby, then we pick up Chilton, and then what a lot of people don't realize is Autauga, Elmore, and Coosa County are all now in District 6. Most people don't realize that, hey, Barry Moore is not going to be your congressman next year. District 6 is where your representative will be chosen from.
So that means in our listening area, Autauga and Elmore County in particular, right to the north of us here.
Absolutely. So you've got all of Autauga, all of Elmore is now in District 6. So it's unfortunate that you guys are losing Barry Moore, but it's one of the reasons I opted to run, because I feel that we need another fighter conservative like him in Congress.
No, and let's start with the basics. Now, we've talked to each other a few times, but folks might not have heard it. So, why? What was the major impetus for you to jump into this race here?
Yeah, so I've been in the business world for 25 years, never run for office before, so there's nothing like jumping into the deep end with a run for a federal office to start with. But it started back in March when our current representative in District 6 came out and announced he was running for a sixth term. Well, most people would say, okay, well, what's the big deal about that? Well, the big deal is when he ran in 2014, he ran on a promise where he said 10 years is enough. This should be a mission, not a career. And he said, I'm only going to run for 5 terms. And he has since broken his word. And if we can't trust him to keep his word there, then it really brings into question everything else. And I started looking into his record, and I believe he started off as a true conservative, but I think that's divulged, as we often see when people go to D.C., they become part of the swamp. And it can change you. And that's why I've committed, and I made that promise not just to the voters, but even more so to my wife, that we would only go to D.C. for 6 years. I mean, we run a very successful business. This will be a huge sacrifice for me on a financial standpoint, but I think we have to do something to save our country. We're at a place right now where there's so much going on that we have to have business leaders and not career politicians. It's kind of like you've said on the campaign trail many times, if you got a truck and it gets driven into the ditch, you got to change direction, change trajectories, and more importantly, you need a change of drivers to get it out. And these career politicians have driven our country into a ditch, and it's time for us to have a change in drivers to get us out and get us back on the road to prosperity.
Well, and for folks who are interested, and I want to get into our conversation here today, into your ideas around term limits, why and how. But there's a book you just came out with called Unshackling Democracy, Embracing Term Limits, Empowering Citizens. I didn't memorize it, folks. I've got it right here in front of me. And I've made my way through a lot of this book. I haven't gotten every single chapter in, but I think I've gotten the broad strokes of it. But just to reiterate the point, what's kind of the opening argument of why term limits?
Well, it starts back with what we have in history from Lord Acton and the famous quote that power corrupts. And you think about that is so true. And we look at man's sin nature. We forget about that we are sinners saved by grace. So we look through that path, and even good people, when they're in a position of power for a period of time, it becomes intoxicating. and it changes someone. And that's why we have to limit the terms in Congress. A huge majority, depending on which poll you're looking at, between 83 and 87% of Americans are in favor of term limits. And I think the ones that aren't are in D.C. or have close ties to someone in power.
Well, and I appreciate, because you taught me something reading your book. Like, I knew the Lord Acton quote, and I knew the full quote what it was about, and I appreciate you sharing the full quote. I mean, should we treat popes and kings as though they're innocent, kind of give them that benefit of the doubt? It's like Lord Acton's point, no, we should kind of presume they're getting intoxicated and falling under the grip of power that they hold. But you cite a scientist in there where there's actually been, I did not know this, there's been studies that show power has a comparable effect to the brain as drug addiction and other things like that?
It does. And in fact, it's interesting to see. And that's why I say power is intoxicating. And I don't just mean it figuratively. It's something that impacts people. And they get to the point where it's their drug of choice and they'll do anything they can to hold on to power. And that's why we see some people in Congress for 30 and 40 years. And we see the House of Representatives and the Senate turned into a retirement home because they just can't let go of that power. And it is impactful, almost so much like a drug.
Well, and it seems like you're giving a multi-pronged argument for term limits. Number one, there's the practical aspect of this and the effects it'll have. But I love that you ground it, number one, in history. This is more American than apple pie, more American than baseball in a lot of ways, what you're calling for. But then you also have a philosophical, or dare I say, theological basis. And that's where I kind of want to start, because it's not every day that I can have a conversation with somebody who shares. You would hope everybody who's a good Christian kind of understands that the fallen nature of man, that idea of the tragic nature, the limited nature of man. And you think it's because of that fallen nature that this is why we get so intoxicated by power.
There's no question. And there are plenty of examples that we see of that throughout history. And that's why I think that we've got to make sure we put limits in place. I mean, because man left to his own devices is going to go down a path that is not good for society and not for good for us as a country. And then when you look from a practical standpoint, all the issues we have in our country, we're talking about the same problems today that we were talking about 10, 20 years ago. And it's the career politicians that have keep moving us down this path. It's groupthink that we see. I mean, I've got a master's in business administration and with concentrations in entrepreneurship and innovation. And I learned when you start talking about innovation, you got to think through new ideas. You got to come up with new approaches to address these problems.
So it's a new approach, but it also has its roots in America. Talk a little bit about the founders and how, if you brought up to the founders' idea of term limits, this wouldn't baffle them. They would know exactly what you're talking about.
So originally this was a debate that occurred early on. In fact, the Articles of Confederation that we originally passed in our country, but prior to the Constitution, they had what they called rotation of office built into that. And then when we passed the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, they did not incorporate term limits into it. But I have no doubt when you look through some of the Federalist Papers and some of the writings and the examples that we have from history, that if our founding fathers anticipated the issues that we had today, from special interests influencing it, from the monetary components that are involved with it, from the seniority system involved with it, they would have absolutely made sure that the Bill of Rights wasn't 10 amendments, that it was 11 amendments, and we would have term limits as part of that.
There you go.
So that's kind of where we're at, and that's why we're at a point now where we have to amend the Constitution and implement term limits to really save our republic.
And again, folks, we're talking to Gerrick Wilkins. He is running for Congress, Alabama Congressional District 6. Gary Palmer is the current incumbent. I honestly have not heard from your other opponent in the race, and I don't know the person's name off the top of my head, but we can get into kind of, because I believe there's a recent forum, we can get into that in a second, but I want to stick to the term limits conversation. So what do you think would be the practical effect? What would, especially bring it up to modern day, how would this improve things in Washington? What are the problems this is looking to improve and solve?
Well, right now we have a huge influence from special interest. I mean, you look at the amount of lobbyists and the influence they have on members of Congress, and it really becomes a swamp, a cesspool of corruption that exists because you have people there for so long. So if we're able to get fresh thoughts, fresh ideas into members of Congress, I think we can see significant improvements. You look at what's gone on in Florida. Florida has term limits, and I think that that's a great example for us to look to. But at the end of the day, we've got to have congressional reform, and I think it starts with term limits. And then we need to look at some other things as well. Again, I'll be talking through this in the coming days about additional congressional reforms, including limiting stock trading by members, and the fact that someone can make $172,000 a year, go to Congress, and 20 years later, they're worth $100 million. Those numbers just don't add up.
It really doesn't add up. And one thing you really get into in the book that I love that you address, because people think of, okay, this person's been up there too long in Congress, whether it's a senator or a representative, but they don't think about how this Byzantine system that comes around the beginning of the 20th century, the seniority system that we have. So I think, Gerrick, there are a lot of folks who vote for a new member of Congress. That new member gets in, and they get very disappointed real quick. Like, why is the new member standing up? Why? I don't think the people are aware of how crazy this seniority system and the committee assignments, how this all works. So let's go into that a little bit. What's the problem with the seniority system?
So the seniority system is very interesting, and I want to thank Senator Tuberville, who helped me on that chapter on the seniority system. In fact, there's a couple of quotes in there from him on that. But as I was doing the research on the seniority system in Congress, I realized that it was not always that way. Before 1908, committee assignments were, surprise, surprise, based on your skill set. So, if you're a farmer that goes to Congress, you'd be on agriculture committee. If you're a banker, you may be on the finance committee. And we appointed, military leaders that went, they'd be on armed services committee. But now we don't make committee assignments based off of your skill set. We've based them off of primarily seniority. How long have you been there? Now, there's some other dynamics that go into play, as you would expect with politics. And of course, you can bypass the seniority system in some cases, but most of the time it's all about seniority. And that's why we end up having to see people sit in office for 10, 20 years, and they'll make the argument, oh, well, I'm in leadership now, so that's why I have to stay there. Well, if we keep going down the same path, it's kind of one of the old axiom. If we keep doing the same thing and expecting different results, last time I've heard, that's called insanity. Yeah. So we've got to change up the criteria at this point.
Well, and it seems to me that everybody looks at DC, kind of the layman, and goes, the system's so broken. It's just not working. And my suspicion, and people can call me cynical if I like, I think I'm just being realistic here, is that no, the system's working exactly how the people in Washington want the system to work. Where, if you have that same guy who's been there 10, 20, 30 years, he's the head of some committee, and you're a lobbyist, and you go into this in the book, I believe, with Abramoff as the example, they love having the system as it currently exists. It's working for them.
Yeah, no, there's a whole chapter in the book, Down on K Street, and we talk about that, talk about the impact of special interest. And in fact, some people will say, well, that's one of the arguments against term limits, is the new members will be more prone to that, and it's actually the opposite will be true, because they're not going to have the time to get corrupted. They won't. We don't give them enough time to do that, and they can actually represent the people.
Well, and from your experience in business and like working with entrepreneurs, working with business owners, and being one yourself, I'd imagine that this exists in the world of business. That when you like say there's a business that needs to be bought and restaffed, restructured, just by kind of blowing that up and creating a new, say, management structure or having new eyeballs on the problem, you're going to find new fixes. Like, it just sort of freshens house. So when you, for lack of a better word, blow up those old relationships, bring in something new, you're bound to get at least something new and hopefully an improvement.
That's right. And we have a system that should encourage that. That's one of the things that makes this country great is, you look at the entrepreneurship and innovation. Some of the best inventions that we have are from Americans. And it's not because they've been at the same company for 50 years doing the same thing. It's because we try new things. You look at the innovation that's come even within the automotive sector or within the computer industry. Goodness, if we had groupthink in place when Steve Jobs started Apple, I don't think we would have the iPhone today. They thought the iPhone was ridiculous to have a camera and a phone and everything in one device with the touch screen. And now look at everyone has it in their pockets.
Yeah, so, got one right here. Yeah, and these things are massive in changing the world. But yeah, sometimes it's that single mind, that person that doesn't give into the group think, the sort of the trained Abilene problem there. And well, we got to hit a break, but I want to keep going on many topics. I just wanted to start with the term limits topic because from what I've read, this book is fantastic. And I think it's not just like a quick pamphlet of we need term limits because they're so corrupt. You go, again, into the details. You base this in your faith and theology, you base this in examples in history, and you lay out the problems in their practical sense has been documented, and you lay out, here's how the solutions. The one thing we haven't talked about here is, how do you get this done? How do you convince, if you get elected, your fellow members in Congress, how do you convince presidents, especially when they have all that lobbying money in their pocket?
Well, that's an interesting perspective. And in fact, I had the privilege of talking with Vivek Ramaswamy just last month, and I asked him that question. And his response was, of course, I got the classic stump speech. Well, we need to term limit the bureaucracy, which I agree with.
Sure.
And then he transitioned to the fact that people are going to act in their own best interest. So if you really truly want to get it passed, the best way to do it would be to exempt the current members that vote on it.
Ah.
So it's an interesting perspective. That would not be my ideal way to get things done, but I'm also not naive in how Washington knows. How Washington works and knows you sometimes have to make deals to get things done.
Oh, no, that makes a lot of sense to me. And again, 272-9228 if you have a comment or question for our guest, Gerrick Wilkins. Let's go to line one, see who we got on here, Gerrick. You're on there. Who's this?
Hey, guys. I just want to agree with the gentleman that's speaking. I do agree with term limit, and he's way smarter than me, but let me just say, when someone's up there, the longer they're up there, the more myopic they think. In other words, it's like a bubble that you just... So I agree with term limits because that's not what's good for America. And then the Founding Fathers, when they thought about Congress, it was, hey, you're making a living at home, you're going and serving the country. There was no paycheck. Now, what has become, after 200 years, there's a lot of paychecks going on up yonder. You know?
Yes, they are.
Anyway, I hope I'm not blowing y'all away.
Nope.
The other thing I wanted to ask is, or it's a question. I've been watching TV, but my question is, you know, Merrick Garland, DOJ head, come out and blasted the response of our police department in one of our states. I don't know which one. But I just would like to ask him, how long would it take for him to get into that school and drop an automatic weapon down? You see what I'm saying?
Not really.
Well, what I'm saying is you got people at the very down top,
right,
that can make these decisions and just scold the police department, and then at the same term say, but I want to work with everybody. No, you're not working with everybody. In other words, I didn't take a $40,000 a year job to run in and get killed. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Anyway, y'all have a good one, and you got a good man on the line. Let him talk some more.
Thanks for the call, Robert. You can see how talk radio can be.
I love it. And I think that's an important part, though. And I think as representatives, we've got to be out talking to the constituents. I mean, that's what we're here for. It's one thing that we haven't seen as much from our current representative, and that's why we've got to be out here. And that's why I'm up and down I-65 every day in this huge district, so I can talk to folks.
Well, we got to hit this break, but before the break, this part of the program brought to you by James Cole and Cole Plumbing. And there at Cole Plumbing, they can help you when you're, especially in an emergency jam. If you notice the carpet's all wet or the ceiling is sagging and there's that big wet spot there, a big water marker, it could be a burst pipe outside your home and your yard is flooding. Whatever it is, something like that needs to be taken care of quickly. Cole Plumbing understands time is of the essence, and they have good news, this proprietary pipelining technology that allows them with minimal discomfort to you and your home to solve that problem. What does that mean? It means they're not going to have to tear out a bunch of drywall. They're not going to have to dig up a huge hole or trench in your yard. With precision and expertise, they can find the problem and solve it. And of course, at Cole Plumbing, they can help you with everyday plumbing needs, from clogged drains to low water pressure. Maybe you need to run a new water line or things you don't normally associate with plumbing, like a gas line leak. They can really do it all there at Cole Plumbing. So you can book an appointment online at coleplumbing.com, but I encourage you to call them, 279-8919. That's 279-8919. And just remember, folks, when you have trouble with your bowl, call on Cole. More with Gerrick Wilkins, candidate for Congress, after this.
Report.
Welcome back to News and Views in the afternoon. Again, in the studio with me, we have Gerrick Wilkins. He is a candidate for Congress, District 6, going up against the incumbent is Gary Palmer, going for the Republican nomination there. And recently, there was a forum with all the candidates, right? How do you think that went?
Well, I appreciated the opportunity to engage with all the voters. I think it's important for the constituents to hear from the candidates. And while I've been pushing for a full debate, I was at least happy to have the opportunity to have a forum and to share my vision for Alabama and to call out our incumbent on some of his votes. Now, granted, at one point, though, I did try to call him out for breaking his promise, and the moderator was trying to silence me and even try to take my microphone away from me. But that's neither here nor there. I do think these are important for the constituents to hear, and I'll take this opportunity to renew my call to Gary Palmer to debate in the southern part of the district. I've offered to donate $10,000 to a veterans charity if he agrees to do that. And I would just reiterate that today. I mean, Gary, if you're ready to actually have a full debate, let's do one down in Wetumpka or Prattville, and let's help our veterans out at the same time.
Well, the gauntlet has been thrown down, the challenge issue. We'll see if Congressman Palmer takes you up on that, Gerrick. But now moving on, and I think the biggest thing that's happened since Biden got in there is this, influx of 8 million folks illegally into the country. What we're seeing at the border is just astounding. And I'm usually somebody, I agree with what Trump said on the campaign trail not that long ago, where he said, we want a huge wall with a big, beautiful door. Come in legally. So I feel like I would make the argument as an American to other Americans, we should have generous legal immigration. But what we're seeing at the border now is bedlam, and it's harmful, it's inhumane. How do we solve this problem?
Well, listen, what's going on at the southern border, it's beyond a crisis. I mean, it's an invasion that's going on at the southern border. And in addition to the people that are with human trafficking that's going on, with who knows what type of terrorists are coming through, we also have an epidemic of fentanyl. I mean, this is a crisis like our country has not seen. I mean, fentanyl is destroying our communities, and it's all coming through the southern border. I was just talking with one of the chiefs of police in one of our local municipalities who was telling me about an officer who died this last year from exposure to fentanyl. And we have got to call them out. We've got to say that these thugs that are bringing fentanyl into our country, it's got to stop. And we've got to take drastic action to do it. We need to send the military down there. We need to eradicate the cartels. And for people to say, oh, no, we can't do that. Yes, we can. I mean, this country is the greatest country on the planet. We have the military capabilities to do it, but we have got to take action. And right now, Congress is not doing their part. I'm a good Republican. I love to blame Biden because he is absolutely responsible, but Congress has the power of the purse, and Congress needs to act, and our current congressional members are failing to act to secure the border. That's why I've rolled out a detailed plan to address it that includes a financial component, but we have got to get this issue under control. It is critical for us to address the border right now.
And it sounds like from me reading your literature here that it's not just, say, a wall and barriers. You're also talking about bringing technology to bear, human resources, more border patrol agents, these sorts of things.
Absolutely. Obviously, I want to finish Trump's wall, but we also need to go ahead and activate the National Guard. We need to send the military down. We need to utilize technology. We've got some of the greatest technological resources in the world. Let's use that to actually secure our border. Let's also talk about regulations and restrictions. We need to make sure that we are penalizing the people that are taking advantage of this system. We need to expand the cost to businesses that are hiring illegal immigrants. And then we also need to look at, like I said, eradicating the cartels. And let's start disincentivizing this action. I mean, right now, we're giving these people free health care. We're giving them a cell phone when they come across the border. That has got to stop. We need to actually go ahead and reform our immigration system. I'm in favor of legal immigration, like you said, but we actually need to change the system. We've got to move from a familial-based system to a merit-based system that prioritizes America first, and not all of these other countries that are trying to destroy our country.
And for folks who don't know, what's the difference between the current way it currently works with familial immigration and what would be the change to a merit system?
So there are different classifications of visas that exist in our country. And what's interesting is next to the U.S. tax code, the immigration code is the largest set of laws that we have in our country. So there's clearly reform has to come into play. We should prioritize those that do want to help grow our country. Like I said, you look back at Ellis Island in the day, we had people coming here wanting to achieve the American dream. They wanted to learn English. They wanted to become part of our country. Now you have people coming over here and they're trying to change our country. Well, I don't want it to change. I love Alabama. I love the USA. And it's been the greatest country on the world because people come here and become part of it, not trying to change it. So if we move from a familial-based system that prioritizes merit, so with people that are going to help grow our industry, they're going to help grow our technology. Like we give out H-1O visas to people that are exceptional to go to MIT or Harvard. And guess what we do when they're done getting that PhD in rocket science? We throw them out of the country.
Right.
Why would we not want those people to stay here? We don't need to be helping China out. We need to be helping out the United States.
Hear, hear. I love hearing that idea. We got another break here, but when we come back, I want to talk about the economy at large. Though before the break, did you happen to see the speech Javier Milei gave before the World Economic Forum or seen the news about that?
I've missed that. I'll have to take a look at it.
Well, and nothing wrong with that. You've probably been busy campaigning. But Milei, the very uber-libertarian new president of Argentina, everybody was all disappointed when he said, I'm going to go speak at Davos at the World Economic Forum. And he said to their face how bad the World Economic Forum is and made a beautiful case for free markets, for freedom of the individual, away from the socialist and corporatist schemes that you're constantly seeing out there. So I just thought as for liberty and for free market economics,
I love it.
What a victory on the world stage.
Well, there's no doubt his winning down there was a huge win for liberty across the globe, and I was excited to see that. I just have not seen that exact speech yet.
Yeah, and if you go to my Twitter, somebody did. It's really what a day and age we live in, Gerrick. They used AI to where the version that was out there was Milei talking in Spanish, and then you could hear the translator on top of them, and it's kind of unpleasant on the ear anytime. That somebody took Milei's voice, AI cloned it, and put it into English. So it's like you're hearing him in his own voice speak English. Wow. And so it's much more accessible. It's on my @thejoeyclark on the X platform. Really cool stuff, folks. But like I said, we do have to hit this break. But first, this part of the program brought to you by, well, Bo Goodson and the Goodson Group. And there at the Goodson Group, Bo and his team are ready to help you, whether you're looking to buy or sell a home here in the River Region real estate market. They've been helping buyers and sellers in Montgomery and the surrounding areas for over 4 decades there at the Goodson Group. And not only at the Goodson Group can they help you buying and selling that property, they have management services available should you want to rent out your home. It's a great idea in this market with all the turnover just from, say, the Air Force bases. But let's be honest, if you don't have any experience being a landlord, doing that yourself can be a big old pain in the butt and a very steep learning curve. Why not, for a reasonable fee, have the Goodson Group do that for you, manage that rental for you? And then the crown jewel there at the Goodson Group is the Bo Goodson Real Estate School, one of the most highly acclaimed in the state because, well, the proof is folks that graduated and they went on to be more successful, players in the real estate market, just private players, or they went on and became fully licensed realtors. That's the magic there at the Goodson Group interactive course where you're learning from Bo's 40 plus years of experience. So check them out today. You can always go to thegoodsongroup.com or give them a call at 551-0225. That's 551-0225. Bo Goodson and the Goodson Group. Great sponsor here of News and Views in the afternoon. More news and views after this.
Joey Clark.
Want to carry news talk in your pocket?
I'm your host, Joey Clark. Again, my guest here for the first hour, we have Gerrick Wilkins, candidate for Congress, in the studio. Have you ever done a lot of radio, a lot of interviews before jumping into the political world, Gerrick?
Not many radios, but I've done commercials in the past when I ran my dealership. So obviously, I'm not familiar. I'm not afraid to talk, whether it's on radio or TV, or engage with people. That's what you got to do in business.
Yes, sir. And and speaking of business, and let's just go to the broad topic of the economy. And you have a lot of experience from your career in the business world, but I think I love the angle of entrepreneurship and where the wealth is being created, people finding and discovering that wealth on the edges there. So when you look at our current economy, I mean, it's a broad subject, broad topic. You can go wherever you like with this. What's the problem with the economy? How do we start to fix this thing?
Well, obviously, it's inflation. I mean, we're dealing with rampant inflation that has been caused by overspending by Congress. I mean, we have a $34 trillion debt, and we love to talk about that. But in reality, what that is that's a $260,000 mortgage, extra mortgage with no house for every American family. And to think about the reason that we're paying more for cars and for milk and for everything out there is because Congress has been spending more money than we have. They've been inflating the dollar to the point where they just have been printing money. And you can't do that. I mean, at some point, there's going to be a reckoning. And that's why we've got to have business leaders that know how to balance a budget to get our spending issue under control. And if we do that, then we can start to see another economic boom. But in addition to that, we need to make the Trump tax credits permanent. We need to go through and prioritize innovation. We need to encourage people to build businesses. Just one of the things that I want to do is with our veterans. I mean, we need to have a program in place for veterans who want to start their own business to help incentivize that. And we've got these programs for minorities and even for immigrants, but we're not doing that for our veterans. I mean, really, please, we've got to do a better job of supporting innovation and growth. And there's so many ways to do that. I just rolled out a full plan called America First Economic Overhaul Plan that's going to put the brakes on inflation, that's going to put us back on the road to prosperity. And it starts by looking at things we can do right here in Alabama. We've got great resources here in Alabama that we can develop. And one of those being just down here in Elmore and Coosa County is the graphite.
Yes.
Everything that's used in our cell phones and batteries. I think that we need to reclassify that as a strategic resource. Let's start mining that at home. Let's restrict China from buying up our mineral rights and then not using them, so we have to keep buying stuff from them. These are things that we need to do to prioritize America first and really grow our economy.
Well, and I'd imagine there are some part of the plan. Let's get into it. Part of the plan is probably the broad swaths, what's good for the entire United States, tax policy, monetary policy, all these things. But I'd imagine as your role as a congressman, if you're elected here in District 6 for Alabama, you're going to be trying to look out for Alabama. And it looks like this district is right there on the 65 corridor. That's how it seems to be broken down. So first, let's do kind of the broad swaths, and then we'll get into how we're helping this I-65 corridor, in particular to your district.
Well, absolutely. And I think that's one of the things that a representative has to do. We've got to prioritize representing our constituents. That's why I'm going to make sure that we have constituent offices throughout the district. I want to be accessible to our community, to our constituents. I want to be able to engage with it, but I also want to prioritize Alabama first over continuing to send billions to the Ukraine and all of these other focuses. And there are things we can do right here. And I can tell you, with the amount of time I've spent on I-65, there is no question in my mind that has got to be a top priority. We need to widen I-65. We need to put some corridors that connect 280 and 65 in place to alleviate some of that congestion. And guess what? That's also going to promote business growth. You're going to make it more accessible for people in Columbiana and in Wetumpka to build businesses when we connect these highways and provide better thoroughfares. So there's a lot that we need to do, and we should prioritize Alabama first. And as our representative in Congress, I'm not going to Congress for me. I'm going for the people of Alabama, and it's going to be we are going to Washington, and that has to be our priority.
Now, when you look at, say, the other side of the aisle, in particular the green agenda, the climate change agenda, which I have my opinions about, but I'm going to stay shut up because I'll take up all the time here. I mean, what do you make of this, especially this big push to push a lot of these renewables like electronic vehicles or homes and onto the consumer? Like, it seems like Washington doesn't want actual innovation that drives down cost and prices. They want to have something that's very expensive. They subsidize through the tax code. But are we ready for this? Is this a good idea?
Absolutely not. This climate change hoax that the left keeps portraying is going to further destroy our economy and bankrupt our country. So I'm all for innovation. I'm all for entrepreneurship. And I mean, I love new technology. In fact, I've been in the car business for 25 years. I love cars. I buy too many of them, as my wife tells me. In fact, I will tell you that earlier last year, I bought my first EV, not because I was concerned about the environment, because I like the amount of power it has.
Sure.
And they perform well. So I bought my first EV, an iX BMW, back in April, and I had that vehicle for 3 months. Because I can tell you, we are, first of all, not ready for it, and second of all, the government should not be picking winners and losers. I had that vehicle at the 350-mile range. I was going down to a conference in Destin, so which happens to be from Vestavia Hills down there, is 300 miles, so I should have been fine, no problems. But when I get down there, planning to plug in to charge, the hotel says, "Oh, we're so sorry, Mr. Wilkins, our chargers just got hit by lightning, and they're out." So then I'm looking, okay, well, where's the nearest rapid charger? Well, it happened to be in Panama City, which was in the opposite direction of me getting back to Vestavia Hills. So I drive out of my way 40 miles to Panama City. And now I have 10-mile range left on my car.
Right.
And the rapid chargers are out. So what should have been 30 minutes takes me 4 hours. I get enough charge to get to Montgomery. And guess what? The rapid chargers in Montgomery are under maintenance. So an hour and a half from my house, I get a hotel in Prattville, and I couldn't even make it home. So the next day, I called a good friend of mine and said, "I'm done with this EV. I'm going to go back," and I bought an Alabama-built Honda Pilot that gets great gas mileage. I know I'm not going to have to worry about buying fuel, and that's where my daily driver has been. So I can tell you this push towards EVs is the left trying to push their agenda. The people don't want it. We should stop incentivizing that. It's not the government's responsibility to pick winners and losers in our economy. We have a free market economy that will provide for innovation, will provide for scope, and we've got to focus on drilling and mining and building back our energy independence. That's what we have to do for our economy.
Here, here. Now, just as a fun question, because you are so into cars, like if you had to pick a classic vehicle, like which are you going with? Like the car of your dreams? I mean, what are you going with?
So I actually have had the privilege of owning a 1961 Corvette that I sold last year, but it was a fun car. I will tell you though, for those of you that didn't notice, I'm a fairly big guy, and I have to take the top off to drive it. So I never drove that car as much as I'd like, but it was a great vehicle, and it's clearly an American classic.
Yeah, though I'd imagine, and I don't have much experience, but the car's built if you haven't updated it, built in the 60s. They're a little unforgiving, right? They're true machines.
They are, and there's virtually no electronics. I think the only electronics might be tied to the starter, and of course the AM radio, not even FM at that point. So it was interesting to see. So we couldn't even listen to your show in that car on the AM channel, but it was a fun car to drive. But the power and the styling behind it, it was great. I mean, it's what America is known for, is those classic muscle cars back in the day.
And then as we're kind of winding down here, a question I asked Gary Palmer last week, and we started talking about your book, but if there were, other than your book, if there are like 3, 4, 5, however many you want to talk about, books that you think are essential to life, that it really shaped you, or you think everybody should read, so to speak.
Well, obviously, it has to start with the Bible. That's where I start every day of my life. It's critical for us to be grounded in our faith. That's a key component for me. And I also enjoy going back to biographies from some of our founding fathers. It amazes me hearing the stories from Benjamin Franklin, who was quite an innovator in and of himself, and to see his tie into our founding. And then one of my favorites is still Winston Churchill. I know he's not an American, but I think was a great leader for freedom throughout our world, and hearing his tenacity and his story. I will tell you, though, his autobiography is 3 volumes, and each volume is over 1,000 pages, so it's not for the light reader at all.
Yeah, he had a lot to say about himself. That's for sure. I think my favorite Churchill story, and I won't get it exactly right, but he's kind of having this back and forth contest of wits, where they're quoting Shakespeare. Him and this other guy keep going back and forth quoting Shakespeare to one another. They go on for an hour doing this volley back and forth, quoting the Bard, and Winston Churchill wins. And then the guy's like, man, I ran out of, how did he do it? And Churchill admits a few days later, yeah, I was just making stuff up. And none of that was Shakespeare.
Well, and I think that's one of the problems we have today is there's so many quotes out there and they're really not attributed to who they are. I think that's very common. You see a meme and someone will send me a meme and attribute it to Churchill or Reagan. And I'm like, he never said that.
Right. And especially with the internet these days, don't get me started. So if folks have been out there listening to this interview and they want to help you out, how can they do so?
So I would love for you to connect with us online. We're on all social media channels for Wilkins for AL. That's FORAL. Wilkins for AL on the Twitter X. I guess that's what they call it now, right?
Right.
You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, and of course connect with our website, which is also happens to be wilkinsforal.com. And you can sign up for our email list. Love for you to volunteer with us. We're doing a lot of phone calls and door knocking, and we'll be at events throughout the district. We're going to be in a lot of stuff coming up, so I'd love to connect with you. And if you see me out and about, I'd love the opportunity just to meet with you and talk with you, because I think that's what a representative is supposed to do.
And I've been recently asking a lot of the candidates who've come in for subsequent interviews, is there somebody, as you've been out and about and meeting folks, somebody that you hadn't met before that they stick in the mind now? You're like, man, what a character I got to meet there.
Well, I would love to say it's probably some of these radio show hosts. I mean, I don't know, but seriously, what has really been inspiring for me is to talk with a lot of our law enforcement. And when I'm hearing some of the stories of what they're contending with on a daily basis from this fentanyl epidemic and them putting their lives on the line every day, it's been encouraging because we don't pay them enough money. They're putting their lives on the line. They're disrespected on a daily basis. And it's been encouraging for me to see their passion for our communities and the stories for everyone that cares about our community and our country. And that's what it's all about. As I put on the bottom of my email signature card, like President Ronald Reagan said, we can't help everyone, but everyone can help someone. And I think we can take that approach, and this world would be a much better place.
And just as a reminder, because it bears repeating, with the new districts, your district, especially within this listening audience, we're talking right to the north of Montgomery here, Elmore and Autauga County, and up there. And our signal goes, I think, to Clanton. So
yes, yeah. So you got Chilton, Elmore, and Autauga County, as well as Coosa County. Elmore, Autauga, and Coosa are all new to this district. They were prior. Your prior congressman was Barry Moore. He will not be your congressman after this next election. You are now in District 6, and I'd love for you to vote for Gerrick Wilkins on March 5th. And I would love the opportunity to represent you, and I'd be honored to do so in Washington.
Well, always great talking with you, and great to finally meet you in person, sir.
Yes, thanks so much, Joey. It's been fun.
Again, folks, Gerrick Wilkins, y'all check out what he's got going on. If you didn't, if you're just, being a little interested now, you're like, man, I heard that guy talking for about an hour. I'm like, I want to know more. Get the book. Get the book on Amazon. It's quite a good read. I've been enjoying it myself. And the book is called Unshackling Democracy, Embracing Term Limits, Empowering Citizens by Gerrick Wilkins. But y'all stay tuned. More news and views in the afternoon after this.